What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another PokerNews Podcast interview segment. I'm joined by Sean Chaffin, who you may or may not know. He has done a lot of editorial content for PokerNews.com, but he's also a journalist in his own right down there in my favorite Lone Star state of Texas. Now, first of all, before we get into too much, you guys will have heard of Sean because I've been mentioning a new podcast that we're going to be producing called True Gambling Stories. Now, this is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, but I couldn't find the right guy. I didn't have anyone that I really trusted yet. And when I met Sean this summer, it seemed like a great fit. And Sean, in fact, pitched this idea to me. So it was perfect. But before we get into True Gambling Stories, I want to give our audience, Sean, a little taste of you. You are a jack of all trades. First of all, you just recently won a big award down there in the Lone Star State. So tell us a little bit about that and what that story was.
Well, I write a lot about crime and travel and just kind of anything that kind of interests me. Anything anybody will pay me for, too, by the way. But I pitched a story to a magazine I work for called Fort Worth Magazine, obviously based out of Cowtown here in Dallas, Fort Worth. And so it was about a murder and an unsolved murder. And for me, it was a really good story. It took a little shoe leather to get out there and research a little bit, but it connected with people a little bit. And so the Dallas Press Club named me an investigative reporting winner in a magazine category. And, it was held at the 6th Floor Museum here in Dallas, which is a pretty big deal. I don't know if you've heard of the 6th Floor Museum, but it's actually a museum where Lee Harvey Oswald shot President Kennedy from. Ooh. And so it was a big deal, and I won the award. I was pretty pumped about it. It was pretty unexpected.
Ooh, I might put you on an assignment.
Statewide award all over Texas.
I need you to get on an assignment because I don't know about all this Lee Harvey Oswald stuff. Like, we might need it. That might be later down the road. Once this podcast takes off, I might need you to get deep into that JFK assassination.
You know what's funny? Growing up here in Dallas, I've never even been to the museum. Wow. The first time I've ever been.
And you were.
We here don't think about it all that often, most of us.
I'm telling you what. Well, you've written a lot of really great stories, and that's one of the reasons why we have you set to do this podcast, which is really digging into stories which either touch on gambling or are super focused on gambling, but mostly that are sort of outside of the box and outside of the realm of what we normally cover. So Poker News is talking, Australia, online poker's over, or, Phil Ivey this. But there's so many deeper, I think, more interesting stories that either just brush on some of the gambling world. There's just a lot of, especially I think in the early days, there was a lot of interesting things going on. And then I think now also with, the dark web and all these crypto things, I think there's a lot of new digital kind of Cowboy West things going down. But I want to talk about some of the things which I'm sure you will. I know we talked about going back into some of the stories which you've already covered and into some of the stuff that you've already done. And I want to just give some of these homies out there some ideas of some of the stuff that you've worked on. Now, I know that you wrote a book, right, which also sort of featured some stuff on gambling.
Yeah, I collected a lot of my magazine work into a book. It's called Raising the Stakes. But yeah, like all these old school cowboy tales and poker in the American West and all these gambling stories really kind of interest me. And initially right here in Texas, there's so many stories right here in the state. Dallas, where I'm from. I mean, if you've read, there's a great book called I'll Do My Own Damn Killing by Gary Sleeper. He's from Plano here. But it's all about Benny Binion and Herbert Noble and their war all throughout the 30s up through the 50s here in Dallas. And most people don't even know. Sorry, cell phone.
It's okay, you're popular.
Most people don't even know that all over Dallas here, like in every major hotel, there was an underground casino.
What?
And it was between the two gangsters. Believe it or not, Benny Binion was a gangster, but it was about their wars. I mean, they had an open shooting right in the middle of downtown Dallas between his henchmen and Herbert Noble's henchmen. And they tried to kill each other. And it's just I really recommend it, crazy story. But all that kind of stuff happened here. And there was a there was a club called the AmVets Club up through the 70s down on Greenville Avenue, which is kind of a hot spot here in Dallas. But there was actually an underground poker club there where guys like Billy Baldwin got his start and stuff like that. It was raided and shut down, and it was robbed. And anyway, Billy Baldwin used to sleep in his car out front waiting for a game to start. But anyway, I kind of got into all those kind of stories and like writing about things like that.
Well, it's so interesting because I think this works in a lot of areas, and there's lots of hotly debated subjects which involve the idea of once you make something illegal, don't you also then in some ways create a space for gangsters and basically that keeping things unregulated is actually maybe more dangerous in some ways. I don't know. I'm all about that liberty life, but you also wrote a story, which I actually haven't read this story. I just saw you write so many things, but that you wrote something about the biggest illegal sports betting ring in Dallas. I feel like Texas making this gambling stuff illegal has maybe actually initiated a lot of illegal gambling.
Well, yeah, and it has to do with things that people don't view as bad or evil. You know, that's why you can find a bookie everywhere. That's why you can find a poker game everywhere. So Texans, you know, they may know it's illegal, but seem to find a way to do it. But this was a gambling ring that was here in Dallas, but it's spread out. They booked billions of dollars of illegal wagers. They had a whole offshore setup. These guys, one of them was a big poker player, a pretty big poker player actually. But these guys who were the initial owners of this thing, they were finding ways to launder their money. They had gold coins, and they were buying.
I'm all about that gold coin life.
They were buying houses in cash, and all kinds of things, sports collectibles. But anyway, one of the interesting aspects of this one is when they finally made their agreement with the government, and they had to make restitution. One guy had to pay $1 million restitution. Okay, so usually you bring in your cashier's check or bank check or whatever, something official. Well, he walks through the metal detectors with a bag, and it's kind of full and heavy. Anyway, he had to bring the attorneys out to go through it, and they counted $1 million in cash right there in one of the rooms next to the courtroom.
Like a boss. He's like, man, I've been trying to launder this money for years anyways. Y'all can have it. It's
pretty crazy. And the guy who headed up the whole thing, I can't think of his name offhand, he had like a $1 million apartment here in Dallas in one of the nicest areas. I think Jerry Jones or Stephen Jones, his son, had an apartment in that area too, and it's crazy.
So was it for sort of fiscal reasons that they did finally get busted? I feel like that's always what happens, is it's like an IRS thing or like some sort of, financial takedown is the only way that they can ever stop this type of stuff.
Well, it initially started what I heard is it initially started getting investigated by what these investigators said is usually what gives it away. It's usually an upset wife.
Oh, snitches.
And they think one of the wives called in and
girlfriends and all of that.
Don't know what's happened, yeah.
Oh, I love it. That's so true. And that's why, when there's those unsolved murder mysteries, they're like, just wait, someone's going to get divorced or
right.
Like eventually it'll come out. Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Well, I'm sure that these are the type of things that you're going to be covering more in depth when you go into the podcast. And so for you guys who don't know, Sean's going to be doing a monthly podcast on the PokerNews Network, which is going to be a real labor of love, sort of a la a lot of these new, really popular true crime podcasts where he's really going to dig in deep and get into some of these stories, do some of the interviews and stuff that you haven't heard. But I guess before people hear you on the podcast itself, which by the way launches the last week of January, and it'll be coming out every month on the last week of the month, although we're hoping to go bi-monthly and maybe weekly someday, but let's just not get greedy. But before people hear you on the podcast, before they start getting into some of these stories, I wanted, even for my own self, to find out a little bit more about your story. When I met you this summer, I found out that you teach a class in Texas it's seventh grade, right?
No, I teach high school newspaper and yearbook.
Okay. So this I find really fascinating. And also to be a journalist in your own right. You clearly are a very busy man, but talk us through a little bit of just your story, sort of how you found yourself in this more full-time work, how you found yourself also freelancing all these crazy, awesome stories, writing a book. Like, give us the timeline.
Well, I grew up here in a little small town of Crandall outside of Dallas, about 30 minutes southeast of Dallas. And I went to Texas A&M. I'm an Aggie. So after high school, after college, I got into writing for newspapers. And then.
Is that what you studied in college?
Yes.
And is that what you saw yourself doing when you?
Yeah, I always wanted to be a writer of some kind, reporter. I like writing feature stories a lot. So I got into a newspaper business, and I owned a little weekly newspaper for about 5 years. And then I got into teaching. And then the last few years, I moved into newspaper and yearbook, and I've really liked it so far. I got some really great students. I teach at a tiny little school called Kaufman High School, and which was actually my crosstown rival kind of when I played football here in my hometown. And so amazingly, about 5 years ago, we moved right next to where I used to practice football, right next to my practice field.
Friday Night Lights, obviously, Clear Eyes, Full Hearts Can't Lose.
Yeah. So now I've just been writing for anybody that'll hire me. Really, I pitch stories and write stories. It's just kind of something I like to do and like to tell stories a lot. And growing up, I was really I was into poker since about 7th grade. My dad worked for United Parcel Service and retired from there. And he and his buddies had a game they've had a game for like 25, 30 years, once a month or once every few weeks. So when they didn't have
there's some stories coming out of that game.
Yeah, and some really crazy games too, And so when they didn't have enough players, they'd ask my brother or me to play in the game. And that's kind of how I got into poker. And they're still playing. They're retired. I'm playing Saturday night, actually playing tomorrow night with them. So, but
oh my gosh,
poker kind of took off, Chris Moneymaker. I got into the World Poker Tour first. It wasn't Chris Moneymaker. Everybody thinks that the World Series of Poker launched this big poker boom. But for me, man, I was into the World Poker Tour every week on the Travel Channel. I was like, whoa, I can't believe these guys are playing for such big money. It was like so unreal to me. So that's kind of what got me going. I started freelance writing in the poker world. And, I would say about 8-10 years ago, I kind of just started going to the World Series of Poker. I'd pick like 4 or 5 days and maybe a few tournaments I wanted to write about or look for a few players. And I'd just kind of make it an entrepreneurial venture and go out and write a story or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever. I'd write a travel story maybe about Las Vegas. And so I'd make a few bucks every summer doing that. It's kind of fun for me. And then the last few years, I started doing a little more. One summer I worked at the Borgata in Atlantic City for kind of their blogging team. I did a little live hand reporting, but also some feature writing. And then this summer, since last February, I've really been working pretty regularly for PokerNews, and they had me come out. And I think I spent a month at the World Series of Poker this summer. And then I spent 5 days working for the World Poker Tour at the Choctaw here in Oklahoma also. So it's to kind of keep growing. It's growing and growing and growing. And there's always something fun to write about in poker, always some interesting person.
See, but I want to keep it going back because starting and managing your own newspaper sounds really hard and crazy. Can you tell me a little bit more about that whole story?
Yeah, it was. And it was really competitive. There's a lot to compete with where I was at. It's called Rockwall. It's one of the fastest growing counties in the country and the smallest county in Texas.
Wow.
But it just kind of got to be a burnout and such a struggle that I decided to go into teaching instead.
So, but you at that point, then you're covering all kinds of just local news stories.
Yeah, all kinds of local news.
To heartwarming, humanitarian stuff.
Right. And I wish I had just been thought of doing what I'm doing now, just gone out on my own instead. But, I tell some of my students, there's so many things, even like for what you do, like when I got out of college in 1997, there wasn't internet video that you could work for. There wasn't internet writing. It wasn't even easy to freelance write because most people didn't. I think I sent my first email my freshman year of college. Like nobody did that back then.
Yeah.
So doing what I do now is so much easier. And I tell a lot of my students, I got a few that are, interested in this. And a few of them have even written for some magazines I helped them with. But you can branch out and find so many different things. Like these guys who work for Poker News who do all this live tournament reporting. Like that didn't even exist when I got out of college. But if it had, I was like, man, I'd have loved it,
Yeah, but part of it too is, I think, and I've said the same thing. For me, I went to film school and I was working in this sort of traditional film environment, and I didn't even know this job existed. Had I known, yes, I would have maybe put myself more into these type of situations. But I also think that's kind of the mystery of everyone's life. I think like so many people, it's more about finding yourself in these different situations and then sort of embracing them than it is like necessarily choosing these paths. Like I think there's just so few people who choose the path and then stay on it, as outside of like, I don't know, doctors and lawyers and maybe like
Right.
veterinarians, which are like the 4 jobs. They give you like 4 jobs you can do when you're a kid.
Right.
Like a teacher though too. That's a thing. But
I try to tell my students there's, you got to really look out there. You got to look for your little niche and you'd be surprised what you can do with it.
And really, and this is what I'm always telling everyone, because I think a lot of college in and of itself, people's understanding of the importance of and necessity of college is really changing and evolving. And I definitely think it's a hard pill to swallow because we've all been brainwashed for so long to like, oh, you must go to college. And not that I'm not saying everyone shouldn't, but I can say for my own self in my own profession, that actually wouldn't have been helpful. And just getting out there and working and seeing things or interning, trying things, is like such a more effective way of finding what you're good at or what you like. And I feel like you're at a really cool place. So as we go back through your kind of timeline, getting into teaching, I can clearly tell you, 2 or 3 teachers that I had in high school that really helped shape my mind and open me up to all kinds of things. So I feel like it's a really special kind of job that you get to do, especially with these kids that are obviously, I mean, it's like yearbook and newspaper. These are classes that kids are taking because they want to, right? Because they're interested.
Yeah, I think so. I got some really good students. It's kind of fun seeing them grow and be successful. And, I try to make them spearhead the program. And, it's not about me.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate with a lot of the students I have, and some real leaders.
I mean, I feel like, I don't know. I just think there's something about that work that must be super rewarding. Although I also can understand that on the flip side, it's probably, everyone always says like teachers don't get taken well care of by their counties, paychecks.
I'm not one to complain. I'm okay. It's you know what you're getting into.
Is it hard to develop these relationships, which are obviously sort of, mentor type relationship, and then have them move on? Or do they often come back and recheck back in with you and let you know what they're doing?
I hear from some of them, some of them will shoot me an email or a text once in a while, or, send me something on Facebook. It's kind of rewarding.
Yeah.
Seeing how they turn out. Yeah.
I have a couple of those high school teachers I still send messages to periodically.
That's pretty neat. I'll tell you what, that really makes them feel good. I guarantee you.
But you're ready to move out of this part of your life and into fully investigative journalist mode again, but in a different capacity than before. No more.
Well, we'll see. I don't know. Kind of see where things go. I've been doing a lot of reporting for Poker News, and I still write for some other publications too, Fort Worth Magazine and Casino Player Magazine, and just anyone. But I've been doing so much for Poker News, I haven't been writing a ton for as many other publications.
Well, and for now the last a little over a month, you've been working on this podcast, which I'm super excited about. So let's give everyone a little taste. In fact, we've got our feelers out talking to some different casinos and stuff, maybe looking for some sponsorship deals. And even they were asking, well, what are some of the things you're talking about for your first few episodes? I happen to know a little bit, but for those who don't, give us a little teaser of some of the things we can expect in the first couple episodes.
Well, the first one we've kind of already got in the can, it's kind of ready to go. I'm really excited about where we're going here. And, like we talked about, these stories, this poker lore, the idea of westward expansion linked to, risk and poker and gambling and things like that. They kind of fascinate me and go together. So this first one we did is really kind of based on a story I'd written over the summer for Poker News. I was out there for a month, and, you have some time in there between when players make the final 9 until the final table. So I wrote kind of this story as like a filler, as like a throwaway almost. It's the story of Stanley Fujitake, who's from Honolulu, and his amazing craps roll at the California casino. I don't know if you've ever been to the Cal or not, or know where it is, but it's not exactly like the most glittering high-class casino you've ever seen. It's kind of small. It's off the beaten path a little bit. It's not even really it's in downtown, but it's not really part of the Fremont Street experience. It's kind of,
I can see it from my condo, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but no, you're right. It's definitely, and there's so many casinos here that it's such a kind of bizarre little random Hawaiian outpost.
And that's the thing. The story kind of became 2 stories in one, really. It's about Sam Boyd's first casino that he ever opened, which is the Cal down there. And he originally named it the California, I think, hoping that Californians would come there. That didn't work. So he spent a lot of time in Hawaii and thought, well, maybe I need to market to Hawaii. So they started running junkets and weekly trips there. And lo and behold, Hawaiians started flocking there. It became a huge hit with Hawaiians. I don't really know why. It's kind of an odd thing. It just happened, but it's really unique. And they have class reunions there and weddings and family reunions, and it became this unique thing. So Stanley Fujitake is one of these Hawaiians from Honolulu that likes to gamble there. And in 1989, he goes into the Cal and plunks $5 down on the pass line in craps. And he proceeds to roll and roll and roll and roll and roll and just goes on and on. It's like a craps player's dream. So that's kind of where this story goes. And I had written this originally for Poker News as like a throwaway, and they ended up using it, and it got more hits than any story I've written for the whole site. So I figured, well, maybe that's what we need to go with for our first one. But even if you read that, this story has even more to it. There's some real insight from experts on. I talked with a professor from Hawaii who wrote a book about the Cal's unique relationship to Hawaiians. I talked to one of the dealers who was actually there in 1989.
Wow.
Event. So we try to really give a little more in-depth, a lot more in-depth than what we did in the story.
Man, I'm so excited. I'm really so excited. And it's funny because when you think about it, of course it makes sense to have initially been marketing towards Californians, but actually, like, don't they say Vegas is the 9th island for Hawaiians. So to end up marketing for Hawaiians, or to end up being a casino where all the Hawaiians go, is actually ultimately probably one of the smartest moves I could imagine from a business perspective.
Well, apparently Hawaiians definitely like to gamble.
Yeah. Oh, and me too. But is the California the one where they have that wall of like golden craps?
Yeah,
rolls?
they have. That's right. They have a whole Golden Arm Club.
Golden Arm. That's right.
And Stanley was the Golden Arm, and we go into more detail about that in the podcast as well. Most people don't even make it, 7 or 8 rolls before they crap out, and he made it over 3 hours.
Holy cannoli!
It's crazy, and the amount of money won there in the podcast, it's mind blowing.
Wow, from $5, dude, that's my dream life. Well, tell us. I want to know a little bit about. Obviously, if you guys want to find true gambling stories, you can find it. We're still working on this, but if you go on the Poker News website and you click on videos, there's a podcast tab underneath. We need a podcast tab on its own, but don't get me started. But you can find it there, of course, but also both you, Sean, and True Gambling Stories. Talk to us about where we can find your social, Sean has a website which has tons of the articles that he's written, which are super interesting, on SeanChaffin.com. But where can they find you on the internet, and where can they find True Gambling Stories?
Well, we have a URL too. You can go to www.truegamblingstories.com, which right now will redirect you to the Facebook, which is at True Gambling Stories. And I imagine once we get our landing spot on Poker News for the podcast, we'll redirect that to the podcast. And we're also on Twitter at Gambling Pod.
Ooh. And where can we find you?
And I'm at Poker Traditions. So I like to write about the traditions of poker, I guess.
At Poker Traditions on the Twitter.
That's right. And anybody out there who's got a story idea, we're going to always need story ideas. So, hit us up. And if you got something good, let us know, or something we should focus on, let us know. The second one I'm kind of planning right now and starting to research is about a train robber. He was one of the last known train robbers. I got a few books here on my desk. But it was one of the last big train robberies, and it happened in Western Canada, out in a little town in British Columbia. But one of the ways I believe he got busted was that he was playing a poker game the night before the train robbery and lost a big amount of money, and people kind of remembered him. So he got busted, and we're going to talk about, the role of poker in westward expansion and in the Old West a little bit, kind of make a cowboy kind of train robber story.
I can't wait, Sean. Yes, I can't wait. This is like so up my alley.
And that's about as far as I planned right now, but I'm starting to put together some more. I'm thinking we'll come back to poker maybe when the World Series of Poker cranks up this summer. And maybe we'll put in some sports betting stories, and who knows? Just there's so much content out there like this that will be good for this, I think.
I am so excited about this. I don't know if you guys can tell, but this is definitely one of the coolest things I feel like to come out of Poker News in a while. I'm really excited about all of these stories, and yeah, I'm really excited to have you on board, Sean. It's been really a pleasure working with you so far. And yeah, so you guys can check it out. It's coming out here real quick, last week of January. And yeah, I of course will also be retweeting everything and supporting this podcast because I believe in it. So thank you so much, Sean.
All right. Thanks a lot, Sarah.